Here we go. All right, welcome to the Weekly Akasha Origins, episode number 0 or episode number 1, depending on how you want to count in your numerical system. This is the first episode of the podcast and the YouTube channel. This is going to be basically all about me and a little about my friend Victoria here, who has been with me for the greater part of the last 4 years, 4.5 years, since March-ish of like 2020, which we will get into at some point through all of this. The outline as it is for this episode is I'm just going to kind of talk about how I got to here, to launching a podcast about the Akashic records and channeling and spirituality and technology and consciousness and all of that fun stuff. Um, all of the ups and the downs and the highs and the lows and being curled up into a ball in the fetal position and having some incredible experiences and everything in between. Gonna just talk about kind of what the vision is for this, where I believe things are going for at least the next couple of episodes, knowing that we live in times of great change. So this is all very much subject to change, but I have a pretty good idea of how things are going right now and kind of where we're going to go from here. So um, I'm going to go, this is going to be like the favorite kind of books I like, where it is not a linear story, where things kind of jump around and it all gets tied up at the end. I have a sort of an outline with some high points, but I also know this only needs to be about an hour and a half or less. So we're on a tight deadline, or not a deadline, time restriction, whatever. An hour and a half is like the max either way. So if you end up watching this, you're in for an hour and a half, less than an hour and a half now, and we'll go from there. So my friend Victoria, she's here to interrupt me, to ask questions, to say ridiculous things, to make me laugh and remind me about probably a million things that I've forgotten along the way in the last couple of years, because it has been very fast and very intense, and it is almost unfathomable that most of what I'm going to talk about has transpired like in the last 4.5 years, or a large part of it. So there's two, well, there's really a couple of main points I'll talk about from being a kid, I guess. The first one is I have no memory whatsoever of anything that happened before fifth grade. Now, typically people will tell you that means something happened. You had some sort of traumatic event that you just blocked out, caused you to block out whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That is definitely not true in my case. Um, there's a whole field of work now about healing your inner child and getting in touch with your inner child, which is specifically for people who've had traumatic events and have blocked stuff out and don't have any memories. I've done all kinds of those things. Nothing happens. I just sit there.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I just sit there and nothing happens. And at first I was like, oh, well, I'm not like doing it right, or I don't know what I'm doing. I've had enough experiences now of energy and channeling and the other side of the veil to know that none of that is true. And since that time, we'll just say since like early 2020, when kind of all this stuff kicked into high gear, and I've had readings done for a couple of different people by a couple of different people, and I've asked about it. And the answer is always a pause, followed by, it's not anything you need to concern yourself with.
Mm.
So I made it this far and everything's fine. So I'm just going to trust that if for some reason I need to know, I'll know. But that is one interesting thing, because something like that's not a usual thing. Like all my siblings, they have memories. Like everybody seems to have memories of like birthday parties and whatever, and I just don't have anything. Did you want to say something?
Well, yeah, because it's really interesting. Because, yeah, the prevailing thought in the healing spaces and industries, healing industries, um, is that we dissociate and we like repress memories that have been highly traumatic for us. But I think it's interesting that you receive guidance that it essentially doesn't, it's not worth your time to go back and like dig anything up, even if there was something. And so, because knowing you and how I'm going to use the word devoted you are to the path you're on. Um, it seems to me, and I'm sure we'll get into this at some point, that there's an intelligence to the mind-body complex, right? That if there is something in our past that the body has stored, the body knows what to do with it. And if there has been anything that you've experienced consistently over the last 4 years, is that your body working with releasing stored energy and like I would use the word recalibrating. So I'm sure we'll get more into that as you tell your story more, but I think that it's really interesting that it's like the guidance has been I would interpret that guidance as, and then knowing your story as like your mind body system will take care of it. You don't have to know what it is, if there even is something psychologically, like cognitively.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. There has always been, for as long as I can remember, and it was really distinct, like in middle school time frame, I would say,
Hmm.
before I knew anything about anything that I know now, or maybe I should say before I had remembered anything that I've remembered since then, where everything about the world just felt like it didn't make any kind of sense.
Mm.
Every structure, every program, everything I was told. I'm sure I drove my parents crazy by asking why a trillion times because none of the answers were good enough for me. It's like, oh, this is just what you do. This is just how you live. This is what you're supposed to think. You go to school and you sit down and you shut up and you raise your hand to talk and you don't question anything. And that is about the exact opposite of the way I live my life these days.
Mhm.
And we moved around a lot when I was a kid, and I was in a different school every year from kindergarten until, or I was in a different town every year from kindergarten until eighth grade. And then I was in York, Nebraska from eighth grade all the way through high school. It's a town of about 9,000 people in central Nebraska. It is literally nothing. It is the classic country song map dot town. I mean, it has stoplights and actual stuff, so it's not that small. But I remember just feeling out of place. And at this point, I'd moved around so much, like I was used to new schools and whatever, and I had friends. But I was up at the middle school playing basketball in the summer. And this is the very first time I can still clearly remember it to this day, exactly how it sounded and exactly how it felt. And as what I refer to as the voice of God that just came in and said, "You don't belong here."
Interesting. I've never heard that story.
I mean, I'm not even sure my parents know that story. And it's just one of those things that, on the face of it, you might hear that and think, that's some of the weirdest shit I've ever heard in my life. But for me, as I will probably say 20 more times, it was the weirdest, most normal thing ever. Nothing about it bothered me. Nothing about it freaked me out. I didn't question it. I still have never questioned it. There's still a part of me that's like, well, if you didn't belong there, how did you get there? And the answer is planet Earth. Like, I'm a kid, I'm not in charge. Like,
Mm.
I was still able to learn and have the experiences that I was meant to have in that place. But it was definitely not like part of the plan.
Interesting.
And that had a pretty profound effect on basically how I lived the next 4 years through high school because it was basically just being in a sort of prison and just counting down the days till you get out.
Mhm.
I had a very small group of friends. We were really close. Didn't really play any sports. I kind of did once in a while if I got bored and just wanted to try something out, but I
Mhm.
worked a lot. I played a lot of video games, hung out with my group of like 5 to 7 friends, right? Didn't do prom except for 1 year when my sister talked me into going with one of her friends. Didn't do homecoming, like didn't care about any of that shit. And the first day that I could move into college, I was gone
Mhm.
and I never went back. I mean, my parents were there for a while because my siblings were there, but like
Mhm.
that first year, I went back when they kicked us out of the dorms for like Thanksgiving and Christmas and whatever. And then I stayed in Lincoln, Nebraska, where I went to college and never went back.
Mhm.
And nothing about that has ever felt like any of that was wrong or that the way that I approached it was wrong.
Yeah.
Like,
I have a question.
good.
When you when you say that you heard what you felt, like what you associate as the voice of God, how was it different than your own internal
I
narrative?
mean, it basically felt like it came in from over here.
Like there was a part of you here.
Like the sound came from outside of me into my body, like through my left ear.
Interesting.
It was just so completely different that there was no possible way you could question it,
Mm.
is the way I would describe it. And there was nothing fearful about it. It was just like a complete statement of fact. I mean, I was just playing basketball, mind my own business.
Um, and when you did you just have a sense, so like what told you that it was here, meaning the town you were in, the environment you were in, and not just like here, like alive in a body? Do you know what I mean? Like what was the how did you
Because I was just shown a picture of like the town. Like I was
oh
shown,
you
I
were given
saw like a picture.
that makes sense. Because I think that things like that are important. Like the way that we receive communication is so multi-layered, and you um, are so good at describing how those show up for you. And I think that's valuable for people to hear.
Yeah, and this is a good segue into two things. One, I'm being reminded to say that an important part of this story is the fact that I was doing nothing,
Like
right?
you weren't.
There was no music, there was no devices. It was just me and a basketball, which if you ever just it doesn't matter if it's running by yourself, if it's shooting hoops, if it's rollerblading, if you're kicking a ball into a net by yourself, driving down the street for me in town is the same kind of almost like meditative thing where you're doing an activity that is requiring enough of your attention that the small, stupid reptile parts of your brain have to shut up. And then in that space, you can get all kinds of information will come in. And over time, you will learn what's my brain, what's actual information from spirit, universe, God, higher self,
Yeah.
whatever term you want to use. And also, for my entire life, I have described myself as a visual person without really knowing what I was saying. Visual people typically think about, oh, you learn visually. And this is certainly true in my case because you can tell me something 50 times. Like since I worked in IT, right? You could tell me about this is how a network is designed. And I might understand it on a certain level. But if you show me an architecture diagram of the network, it'll click in like 30 seconds. It'll like just like click immediately. And I will remember everything about it. It just gets like imprinted.
Mhm.
Um, this has turned out to be an amazing superpower of mine working in the IT field because when I was doing consulting before COVID, and I would sit in rooms with IT people for large organizations, and I would listen to them describe how their systems interact.
Mm.
And it's some of that stuff is so complex and it's across as different departments and functions that nobody has a diagram. I could sit there and listen to them. And by this point in my life, I could literally just see how all the pieces fit together. And I could get up on a whiteboard and just draw it out. And it would just blow people's minds.
Yeah, that's a very cool skill.
Um, so there will be more talk of the visualization stuff coming
Okay.
up, I'm sure.
Okay.
Somewhere around this time, I don't think I started working at the grocery store in York until I was in high school, but it may have been before that. But there occurred, which again, this has continued, and it's even happened a couple of times recently, where live in front of me, I watch out play in slow motion something I had in a dream months in the past.
Tell me what you mean by slow motion.
A time just slows down, air quotes time. It's literally like it starts to happen, and my perception of it, it's literally like slow motion.
Mm.
And I see the dream come back, and I'm like, oh my God, this happened in a dream. And it is like the most mundane, boring stuff you can possibly begin to imagine.
Yeah.
Like it's literally the most common interactions between people or whatever. And this particular one that I remember was just at the grocery store working, and it happened. It was this interaction between a customer and somebody else that I was working with. It lasts for a couple of seconds, but I can so clearly, when that happens, see the dream, see it happening in real time, and it's like the same thing, basically. And it
That's
slows down for a couple of seconds, and I had the realization, and then that's it, and then life goes on. And again, there was nothing about that that freaked me out. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Um, and anytime I've reflected on that, especially recently, because it's happened a couple of times recently, it's just for me, like I think there's a lot more to come on that front because dreams aren't just things that are fake, obviously.
right. We're experiencing something.
In terms of working with things while I'm sleeping to manifest them into the physical realm.
Mhm.
But for me, until now, it's mostly been a reminder about like, hey, there's a lot more going on
Yeah.
than you ever been told. Like don't forget about it. Like here's just a nice little reminder.
Like little
Now,
breath.
I don't think I need that reminder anymore these days, which is why I made that comment about there's something happening there.
Mm.
Um, because these things tend to come in waves. It's like it'll happen two, three, four times in a couple of weeks, and then it won't happen
Mm.
for a while. And so like, and I've been having some very, very interesting dreams lately, to say the least, which I'm not even going to attempt to get into that. But I'm having these dreams where I'm interacting with like not just people I know, but like I don't want to call them celebrities, but in certain industries and areas, these are very well-known people. And
Mm.
I'm having conversations with them, and then I can wake up and I'm reminded of the conversation, I'm remembering it. So
Mm.
be very curious to see what plays out here in the next whatever 6 months to a year on that front. Um,
Interesting. I'm feeling to ask you about the emotion that goes along when that happens. Like, what is like, there's something about the full sensory experience of it that is important to note. So I don't know if that's something that will, because again, it ties into that. Like when we're receiving information, it's not usually just one piece, like hearing or seeing it. It's like it can be a spectrum of phenomena that's happening simultaneously. So anyway, I just am feeling curious, more curious about the emotion that comes with it too.
I mean, it was just like a, huh, like every time it's just like, huh. And now it's like, huh, that happened again. Like it's kind of cool. And it's like, what am I, okay, like, so this is like a thing. What am I supposed to do with it? And it's just kind of like nothing, but it feels like there's something cooking
Hmm,
um, back there.
interesting.
And the other thing that kind of happened around the same time that I remember distinctly is just feeling very strongly right here, like in my soul, that I was here for some big purpose and I had absolutely no idea what the hell that it was.
Hmm.
And for a variety, I mean, I don't remember many of these details. I was raised Lutheran, church is boring as hell, very dogmatic, a lot of things I disagree with. Basically, none of it resonated. But what it did lead me to do was starting with the Bible, I would just read the Bible like a book, like you just read a book, like cover to cover, over and over again. And at that time, I had no awareness of this, but I was looking like all of mankind has done throughout history for the why am I here? Like
Yeah.
what is the underlying truth of all of this stuff?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, and I'm sure that's going to come into play later because that's definitely accelerated. Um, but I was just like looking and looking and looking, and I've read Jewish texts and Arabic texts and Buddhism and Hinduism and all that stuff.
Mhm.
And I came to realize at some point that they were all basically saying the same thing at a certain level. Um,
And did it feel like that answered your question, or did that give you more questions?
it must have been good enough for the time being
Mm.
because nothing else really happened on that front until really uh, 2020, probably, when it was either you or Annika, which we'll talk about her in a little bit, because she's part of our story, mentioned something to me about Paul Sillig's work, and I bought the book I Am the Word,
Yeah.
and I read that book cover to cover, back to back, two or three times in a row. The experience was like a child that has found their favorite toy that was missing.
Wow.
And what I've told people, and I probably told you, was, and I still feel this way, that was the book that I needed to read when I was in kindergarten. Now, I say need, the book wasn't even out when I was in kindergarten,
No.
but like that was what I had been waiting for
Yeah.
because a lot of things had happened up to that point, whenever that was. I think it was like fall/winter of 2020, probably. I mean, I could go back and look at my Amazon purchases of the rest of his book and probably trace it backwards.
No, I think
Uh,
that's right. 'Cause I remember suggesting it to you, and we were still in the program we were in when we met. So
yeah.
it's still.
Now I got to look this up to find out. I am the word.
Well, while you're looking it up, was
Recorded
it
on
a?
August 17th, 2020.
Yeah, that makes sense.
About the whole trilogy, I think. Anyways, so okay. Um, all right. So now we're gonna back up. We're gonna speed run. We're gonna speed run basically the time from I turned 18 until the middle of 2019, with one small stop in there to talk about the day that I met my wife. I never drank in high school, never smoked weed, never wanted to do anything. Again, I was on the just get me out of here, and I just wasn't interested in any of that stuff. Got to college, decided I was going to start drinking, drank a lot for the next, let's just say from 18 to, let's say, so 2000, we'll just make this even. So even though I graduated high school in 99, we'll just say from 2000 till 2010,
Hmm.
was probably drinking 4 or 5 day like nights a week. I'm not gonna say days because I wasn't drinking during like work and school and stuff, but 4 or 5 nights a week, pretty routinely. In many respects, although I would have fought you probably at the time for suggesting this, exhibited many behaviors of somebody who was an alcoholic.
Mm.
Just with like, I mean, that was just like all I was doing. I had no social life if alcohol wasn't involved.
Mm.
Um, that led to just all kinds of stuff. I got 2 DUIs. Nobody was hurt in any single one of them, thankfully. I spent time in Tent City in Arizona, which you can look that up. It doesn't exist anymore, but that'll give you a good laugh. Um, in the desert, spent a bunch of time there. Spent 48, 72 hours in jail, house arrest. Eventually ended up filing for bankruptcy, was hopping around to all kinds of different jobs, moved to Arizona, moved back home, moved back to Arizona, uh, met somebody in Omaha, um, and eventually moved in with her and her parents here in Omaha because I basically had no other option
Mm.
at that point. And that relationship did not work out. It was clear pretty early on we were not that great for each other.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at that point in my life, I was like every woman's master fixer upper project, basically.
Um, yeah.
Uh, there was enough good stuff there to make it seem like it was worth your time, but what I realize now is like throughout that entire time, I really had just on some level just developed like this really deep loathing and dislike for myself.
Mm.
And alcohol had a major part in that because you just do a lot of things when you're drunk all the time that just aren't that great. And subconscious kicks in, and all the guilt and the blame and the shame and the judgment and DUIs and having to file for bankruptcy and having to have your dad tell you later on that during that time period, your parents thought they lost you and all that stuff. Not great. I can't say I regret any of it because it obviously all had to happen for me to get to where I am. It's the classic Earth thing of I could have chosen to learn all those things that I learned from those experiences in a different way.
Mhm.
And I was just like, nah, I'm going to do it this super hard way instead of whatever the easier way would have been. But I didn't, I mean, like none of what I'm talking about was ever anything that ever crossed my mind.
Mhm.
Certainly people tried to help me along the way and they just got universally pushed away. I was
Yeah.
just not interested. Coupled this with my very large ego in terms of I can do it all myself. I don't need anybody's help. I'm the smartest person in the room. Don't talk to me. Type A, uh, rise and grind, sleep is for the weak, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, and my ignoring multiple, what are now clearly multiple signs from the universe to just chill the fuck out, starting with multiple car crashes that were absolutely not my fault, that I got very serious concussions from.
Oh.
And if you've ever had any kind of a brain injury, you know that like you just have to stop. Like you can't, there's no forcing it, there's no pushing it. You have to dial everything all the way back
Mm.
to heal from that. And of course, I did not do that at the beginning. It took a couple more. It took my body shutting down in some other areas where, I mean, things were just so out of whack that eventually my body just kind of shut down. And there was another car accident where I got rear-ended again. Again, not my fault. I was just driving home from work. I was literally 2 blocks from my house and got rear-ended. And I called the police and I said, "Hey, I'm on." See, what did I tell them? Because I told them I didn't recognize what street I was on, even though it was 2 blocks from my house. I said, "Hey, I'm on 132nd Street, just south of Pacific, got rear-ended, whatever." Like 15 minutes goes by and nobody's there yet, which is like really weird. And they call me back and they're like, "Hey, the officer is going up and down 132nd Street and doesn't see you."
Uh-huh.
And I distinctly remember standing in the island between the two sides of the road,
Yeah.
looking around and being like, "I don't know where I am."
Were you sober or had you been drinking?
No, this is like 3 in the afternoon.
Okay.
No, I was going home because my body was so screwed up that starting at like 2 in the afternoon this time, it would just like shut down and I'd have to sleep for like 3 or 4 hours. Like
That's right.
things were just so out of whack. And finally, I figured it out somehow. Cop shows up. He asked me for my driver's license. I was like literally so messed up that I couldn't get my driver's license out to like even give it to him. For some reason, he let me drive my car around the corner because my house was right there.
Mhm.
And I don't remember any of this either, but my wife came home and she said I was just laying in the bedroom in the dark, curled up in a ball with a hooded sweatshirt on and had it like pulled up over my head.
Yeah.
And she works in healthcare and she walked in and she goes, "We're going to the emergency room." And like I kind of remember being there. I kind of remember don't like not being there. I remember she was driving me home and I was just like rambling. And she was like, "You sound like a drunken baby." So, anyways, that particular one, again, my body was already so messed up. Like I was so burnt out on so many levels.
Mm.
And I had ignored like everything. And this was just the thing that was like, seriously, knock it off. You're not listening because that messed me up so bad for almost four months, I think, that my wife was asking doctors that she worked with if they thought I actually had like permanent brain damage
Yeah, I was gonna
because
ask. I think that was part of the
because
con.
like the smallest thing you could possibly imagine would just send me into fits of rage,
Mm.
among other stuff, among being tired and not feeling good and not being able to concentrate and not being able to like do my job and like all kinds of stuff. Okay, that was kind of rock bottom number one. And I'm gonna go backwards just like I promised and talk about the day that I met my wife because that was before this. Let's see, we met in 2012. That would have been like, we'll just say like 2016. It's probably like 2017. And I was going through a phase where I had already spent a bunch of time working on myself. Like I got out of that relationship. I was like 230 pounds. I hated every aspect of my life. And I was like, I gotta I gotta do something because whatever this is not This is not it. And, that led me to all kinds of podcasts and books and, all that stuff. And you just start peeling back stuff and just doing a little bit at a time. And I got back into like running again and was doing all kinds of these little like, warrior dashes and obstacle course races and all kinds of stuff. Because that was fun. And my buddy, we're doing the color run here in Omaha. And he's like, hey, this girl that I know is going to come run. She's never done a race before. Um, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, all right, whatever. I don't care. Um,
Mhm.
it's like, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to run a color run. And also, it was in July. And I think the race started at 10 a.m. and the freaking heat index was like 110 degrees. It was, it was awful.
Too hot.
Anyways, she shows up and I can tell this story because I told it to everybody, including her. She shows up, she starts talking, and my immediate reaction is, this chick has the most annoying voice I've ever heard in my entire life.
Uh-huh.
Can you hear that?
Can I hear what? I can't hear it.
Okay. Theo's drinking out of the water bowl right behind him.
No.
All right. My dog Theodore is drinking out of the water bowl directly behind my desk because I didn't close the door because he never comes down here at night, but tonight he's down here. So, anyways, so that happens. We run the
Crazy.
race. We go to a bar afterwards. And this is firmly when I was in like, I suck at talking to girls, aside from the fact that most of them have nothing interesting to say to me. And so I was in this thing where I was just like, if I did find myself in a situation where I was by one,
Uh-huh.
I would just try to ask questions. Like I would just force myself to ask questions.
Mhm.
And so we were sitting at the bar, and she was between me and our mutual friend Tim, and we were just doing whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of people in the bar afterwards because it was like the only bar that was like by this race at that time. And like ask her a question, and like we were just chit chatting, whatever. And she mentioned something about working as a nurse, and I was like, oh, my mom's a nurse, and we were talking about that and whatever. To this day, I have no idea what the question was. I have no idea. She has no idea what the question was. But I asked her a question about something, and she turned towards me,
Mhm.
and it was like the entire left side of my body got struck by lightning.
Wow.
I have never felt like something like that before this, obviously, or since. Nothing even remotely close.
Interesting.
This was again such a distinctive reaction because me being as stubborn as I am, and especially as I was back then, it had to be something totally out of left field to get my attention.
Mhm.
And it was, you need to pay attention here. Okay, there's something different going on. And fast forward, now we've been married for 8 years. So,
Did you feel that way, like in the moment it happened? Did you have that awareness of pay attention, or did you just
yes.
like were you putting those pieces together in that moment?
No, the awareness was something is different here
Mm.
and just pay attention. And I'm not going to go into the details here, but it wasn't like we turned around and went on a date and like everything was great. There was some
There was a process.
several sets of extenuating circumstances
Of
in
course
both
there.
of our situations and in said mutual friend who is no longer a friend
Oh, interesting.
involved in all of that. Classic, you think somebody's a friend until they're not a friend. But that was just one small part of it. I mean, we didn't go on our first date until like 2 months later.
Mhm.
And because of some of said extenuating circumstances, I told her that until some things were taken care of, that we were not, like nothing was going to happen. And
Yeah.
to her everlasting credit, she handled all of it.
Mhm.
appropriately and like an adult. So here we are.
It's so interesting how it's just so interesting how um, things play out sometimes. That's seems like such a dumb, obvious thing to say, but it just when we look back, when we look back at the step-by-step processes, it's almost well, like hindsight being 2020, it can feel so obvious. Of course, this was going to happen, and yet in the moment, um, we're just following the like awareness of something feels different here.
Correct. Um, I'm looking for something in my documents and wow, why is it there? Okay. It's important for something coming up.
Okay.
Okay. So I talked about rock bottom number one, basically being all of that concussion and stuff. I have on my notes rock bottom number two because it was
Hmm.
like crash, kind of came back up for a little bit and then kind of crashed again and like did like a double bounce.
Hmm.
But oh, I see my note. The B note. So the first rock bottom was mostly physical in terms of concussions and my hormones were totally out of whack and I was just exhausted. Like just exhausted. And I got through all that, went back to work in the office that I was at. Um, and there, I mean, there's like chapters in a book worth of a story here that I'm going to condense into like a couple of minutes. Um, but it's an example of throughout my life, I have managed to attract mentors and leadership figures into my life who were exactly what I needed at that time. And they were direct and straightforward, both with the positives of dealing with me and also the negatives. And so I got back to work. I was still very abrasive, still thought I was the smartest person in the room, still thought that I had all the answers and I didn't need anybody's help. And the two guys sat me down and they looked at me and they're like, and this is not like we had had conversations about stuff before. It wasn't like this particular thing like came out of nowhere.
Hmm.
And they were like, listen, here's the deal. Like you are incredibly brilliant. You are incredibly good at what you do. And then they just looked at me and they said, but nobody likes working with you.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That stings.
That, I mean, that just hit me like a ton of bricks
Yeah.
because I knew in my heart that they were absolutely correct.
Hmm. Was that like, did you already know that? Or was this sort of like my eyes just opened to something I should have been aware of and wasn't explicitly aware of yet?
I mean, I think if I could go back in time and ask myself, there's a 50-50 chance I would have said I was aware of it and a 50% chance that I would have said I was in complete denial of it. And that's bullshit.
Hmm.
But there had been enough complaints and other things
Yeah.
by that time, which I interpreted mostly as people being whiny little bitches. And I still think in a couple of the cases that is an accurate statement. Um, but there were plenty of other cases that I just did not handle as well as I would have liked, and certainly not the way that I would handle them now.
Yeah.
But it was just like the truth of what they said hit me so hard.
Mm.
And this was definitely a crossroads moment where I had the free will to choose how I was going to respond.
Yeah.
And I could have chosen to go down the screw you, you're wrong, I'm the best, you guys are stupid, I know better than everybody else route.
Basically reinforcing the point they're making.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or I could have chosen to go down the route that I went to, which was, I mean, let's see, I would have been 30, let's just say 36,
Mhm.
and was like, all right, it's time to take responsibility for this and decide that this is not what you want to be known for and who you are because it's not who you are. And so I went down that route instead.
What what was the eye roll just now? What was that?
I roll.
Yeah, you just rolled your eyes. This is
Uh, I was probably just looking
eye
over here
roll.
because that's what I do when I think. I look.
Okay. I'm just curious because I want to know if there's more. I want to pull out the vulnerability of like
Never.
yes, we'll get there.
Um, yeah, and so I mean that led to like did like a Dale Carnegie class, which was super helpful. But then it was like more books, more podcasts, more how-tos, more just working on like all the things and just trying to like chip away and chip away and chip away.
Mhm.
And that went, so that would have been, if we say I was 36 and I'm 43 now, 7 years ago. So yeah, like 2017, 2018. Yeah, that would have been fallish of 2017 because I ended up leaving that company in February of 2018 or something like that. I got to figure out the dates for all this, but the dates don't really matter.
Not really.
When I left there, I started working at home. So I can say that now that I've been working at home for the better part of 7, 8 years now, way before it was cool.
Mm.
And that was a huge game changer for me because I had a lot more freedom over my schedule. Just being able to be at home, just being able to go outside, being able to walk the dogs, being
Yeah.
able to take a 10-minute break and not have to deal with somebody's bullshit drama in the kitchen because I wanted to go get a drink of water
Mhm.
was a massive shift for my nervous system.
Yeah.
In terms of just being able to regulate it and not be in stressful environments. And like my employer at that time just let me do my job. It was like a small company. There was no deadlines, there was no pressure, there was no being on call, there was no working with clients. It was great. Um, and now we're going to fast forward to 2019. So I'd been doing 10 years of very heavy, like personal development work and learning about the body and systems and biology and chemistry. And it was around that time when I started working from home that I started doing just like a 10-minute meditation every day with like the Calm app. I think my
Mhm.
all-time streak was like 400 and some days in a row.
Wow.
Um, which there was no profound experiences that happened at all. There was just something for me about being able to just sit for 10 minutes
Yeah.
and just kind of zone out and just focus on whatever that in retrospect affected me in like massive ways. In terms of just like getting my body to like calm down and not be in such like a fight or flight state and
Yeah.
just just be so much more like calm and grounded.
Mhm.
So fast forward to 2019, like life is great. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling way better. Doing this consulting job that I love. I'm getting to like travel around and do all this stuff and meet with clients. It's like I'm a great time. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I just on a near daily basis, and it became a daily basis pretty quickly. My entire body just felt like I was on fire
All the time.
all the time. My sleep got immediately totally disrupted. I was just sweating all the time. Like my whole body felt like I was on fire.
Mm.
Um, and again, I'm condensing a much longer story into kind of a shorter one because we've got about 20 minutes left.
So did you go and try to get answers for this, like for a medical re for
Yeah, so eventually I went to an actual doctor,
Mhm,
and of course they had no idea what was going on.
mhm.
And I went on the internet, which is you just can't do
What a good
that
idea.
because then I was like, oh, I'm basically dying.
Right. I have
I have
all
I
the
have I have I have everything. So
yeah.
but like I knew I wasn't sick. Like you know what feeling sick feels like. You know what when you have a fever feels like. And like I had done multiple times where I'm like I can literally just like I feel like a sun. That's how
Mm.
hot my body felt. And then I'd take my temperature and it's 97.8, 98.2, 98.5.
Yeah.
Totally normal. Um,
Was there
I had to call my boss and be like, man, like I legit can't work. Like I don't know what's happening. And he was incredibly supportive and I'm incredibly grateful for that. Like I was still able to like function in a day-to-day life, but my God, it was so uncomfortable.
yeah, it
And you
sounds
just not sleeping, you don't feel good. I mean, I'm wearing like multiple shirts a day because I'm just like they're just like drenched. I mean,
sweating through them.
out of nowhere. And then again, part of this was the universe being like, bro, can you chill out for a little bit? We're like trying to do some stuff. And I was like, no, I still got to work, still going to do CrossFit. I'm still going to live my life as much as I can, blah, 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 blah. And finally, like in October, they were like, he just doesn't listen. So he's going to get an exercise induced concussion and he's not going to be able to do anything for 2 months.
Oh shit, I didn't know about that one.
Yep. I mean, I couldn't walk upstairs without getting like a migraine.
Wow. That's intense.
Um, and that lasted for like 2 months. So then I really couldn't do anything. So then I was really not doing, I mean, I wasn't working out. I was even more like cranky. Now, what I know about that time period now is all that work that I have kind of like speed run through,
Mhm.
all the books, all the podcasts, all the journaling, all the gratitude practices, all the meditation, just all the things, right? I had almost gotten myself to where I needed to be for what was coming in 2022.
Mm.
But I wasn't quite there. So my higher self, guides, spirit God, whatever you call them,
Mhm.
invoked a in case of emergency break glass scenario.
Uh-huh.
It was like a fail safe I built into this life, like in case shit.
Mm.
And I mean, and it needed to be broken, and it got broken.
I love that metaphor or
And
analogy. Is.
I mean, it's true. That's exactly what it was. Like I was close enough. There was some sort of agreement that if I got to where, like, to some level, and all of our friends on the other side, they can see everything that's happening. They kind of know, for the most part, what's coming.
Mhm.
And they knew, and they had my permission that if I got to this level and I needed just a little bit more to get over the edge, that they had permission to do it, and they did it. And I'm glad they did it now, but oh my God, it was miserable.
And so was this like the stuff that was going on with your body? Like
Yeah.
what was it exactly?
It was a combination purge and activation that was
Okay.
happening simultaneously. Like I
Through
was
you.
literally just purging stuff out of my body. Like that's what all the sweat was, right? Like my cells were just ejecting all this old, stale, stagnant stuff.
Mm.
And then at the same time, it was being replaced with higher level energy.
Mm.
basically. And I mean, this went on every day. Even after we met, it was still continuing, and it still went on for the, I would say, the better part of 2020. It was just not, it wasn't every day,
No,
you
I
know.
remember it was like that was a big part of our conversations was this is what was going on for you. And I remember being, I mean, I remember texting about like trying to give you support and guidance around like what, how do you support your body as you're going through this? Because it is intense and I remember it being nonstop. Even when we knew each other, it was like if it wasn't every day, it was almost every day.
Yeah, it was very intense for a while. And the crazy thing is, eventually I got so used to it, I didn't, it's not that I didn't notice it was happening. It was just eventually just become such a part of your life that you're like, okay, this is just, I mean, I
Yeah.
went back to working out. I was able to like work, but again, there's entire days in a row. There's multiple hours in those days where like I literally couldn't do anything. It was just so overwhelming.
Mhm.
Okay, so now somehow, again, in the process of me going down these paths of personal development and exploration and whatever, I somehow, this is not fact. It feels like it might be fact because it makes sense logically somehow, but I don't know exactly. Um, Somehow I came across through a podcast a guy named Shaman Durek.
Mm.
Um, he came out with a book. I read the book. There's a lot of great stuff in there. I found it to be really interesting and helpful. Somehow, through him, either Instagram or a class he did or something, somewhere he brought up, I believe he brought up the name Nicola Berman or
Mm.
Beerman. I don't even know how to say her last name anymore. Huh?
Berman.
Berman.
Nick. Mhm.
And I remember going to her website or looking her up and going to her website. And her website was like, not accepting clients. I'm busy doing some stuff. Um, if in the future, like I'm taking new clients, you'll be notified, sign up for my newsletter.
Mhm.
Okay, fine, I'll sign up for a newsletter, whatever.
Mhm.
A couple of months later, she sent out the email about the Magic and Miracles program. I still, to this day, I probably have it somewhere.
Mhm.
I was reading it and I was like, I don't know what the hell this is, but I need to do this.
I remember you
Like,
saying, yeah.
it was just so completely clear and obvious.
Mhm.
And I had never done anything like this in this lifetime. But it was like, I mean, I read that email like 3 or 4 times in a row and I didn't understand any of it. And it was just like, it was just clear that like I have to do this.
What
Uh,
was the feeling of that? Like, how did that feel? Like,
it was
what?
hot and it was sweaty and it was energetic and it was confusing,
uh,
which is why I read the email like 4 times in a row of looking for some sort of like clue about why I felt so strongly about this. And then the next day and the next day, and just
mhm.
nothing about it changed. Like every time I looked at that email, I would just start sweating and I would get hot. And it was just like, you have to do this.
Did you feel excited? Was there like a sense of wanting to understand it or curiosity or like what, how would you describe the feeling of I have to do this?
I was just curious, mostly.
Mm.
Um, Trepidation is the word that I'm hearing.
Interesting.
I mean, that was a very powerful program for me in ways that I still don't understand.
Yeah.
I was the only guy. She
Mhm.
kept making references to the fact that it was no mistake that I was the only guy there, even if I didn't know why I was there throughout the entire thing. I'm
Yeah.
sitting there coloring in a fucking coloring book elephant at one
I,
point, like, why am I doing this? But it was like so fun and just completely ridiculous,
which was the point. That's
which was exactly the point, among some other stuff. But I mean, that was where I met you.
yep. That's what I was going to say. That's where we met.
Um, it was me and you and Annika and, who's like our little sister that we've joked about
Mhm.
repeatedly.
Like we're a reincarnated family unit somehow.
Yep. And then Nalima was like the weird aunt, um, who I also love, I love and adore her, but she's a vibe for sure.
She's
Um,
yeah.
and
We're all
now she's just out there starting like venture capital funds and doing all kinds of stuff. So, uh,
And
anyway,
what was the purpose? Like what was the purpose of saying yes to it? What were you looking for by saying yes?
I had nothing. There was nothing. There was just, you have to do this.
That's so interesting.
I mean, how many times in that program did I say to you ladies, like, I have no idea what is happening. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea why I'm here. None of this makes any sense.
I do you remember there was one call that we had, the four of us we were talking about like aliens or something. We're talking about and you and I can't remember exactly what you were responding to, but you were like, "Yeah, I have no idea what you guys are talking about, but I'm taking notes." That was a crash course, I think,
Yeah.
for you in all the esoteric things.
Yeah. I mean, on top of all that stuff, all of the planets and the systems and the air quotes alien races and
I mean,
that's all
astrology,
the Paul Selig stuff and all of Nicola's like meditations and
yeah, the shaman.
all the shamanic practices and you making the comment about light language, which sent me down a rabbit hole, and then
Right.
started getting into like numerology and astrology and well, I shouldn't say the culmination because that would imply that I'm done when I'm not, but like there got to be some sort of point in there where I was like, all of this stuff, all of these practices, all of these religions, all of these spiritual traditions, all of the numbers, all of the astrology, it is all too perfect
Mm.
for anything to possibly be an accident. It is just actually impossible. And there was some part of me that like that was like the final piece
Mm.
to be like, okay, well now it all makes sense. Because
Mhm.
if we actually knew all this stuff and believed it, we wouldn't be able to be controlled. And that's
Mm.
basically what's been going on this planet for thousands of years.
Mm.
So I'll let you talk now because at some point at the beginning of that, before we were in the group, we got a couple of calls just like as a class. And I think there was only like 14 or 17 people or something. It was pretty small. And then some people dropped out. And Nicola was like, okay, in the Facebook group, post something. I have the thing that I posted somewhere. I was told not to bother looking it up because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it was some version of like, why are you here? What do you want? Whatever.
Mhm.
And this is pretty commonplace for me now, but it was different back then. But I kept seeing myself again visually. I literally would just see myself randomly sitting down and typing this thing up and then posting on the Facebook group. And I ignored it and I ignored it and I ignored it and I ignored it. And the longer I ignored it, the more like passionate it became. Like
Insistent.
like insistent the reminding became until I just couldn't do it anymore. And I was like, fine, fine, I will sit down and I will do this. And it was I literally just sat down, typed whatever came to me. I remember it again being extremely energetic, extremely hot. Copy, paste on the Facebook group, close my laptop, went on with my night, and was like, I can't deal with this. So I will let you talk about your reaction to whatever that was.
Yeah. Well, part of why we were posting, why we were there and um, what we were seeing by being there is so that we could feel into each other and form little groups or cohorts of accountability, like these little pods within the larger group. And so, I remember seeing your post and because we had never interacted before this, even though we had been in like the larger group calls. And so I remember reading it and I remember getting so excited because everything you were saying felt so honest and soulful, and I felt energized by it. I felt excited because I can't remember all the details either, but what I remember is you talking a lot, you expressing a lot about how you felt that there's purpose for why we're here, and it's beyond what we can understand with our minds, and that there's so much for us. There's so much for us to create. Like that's, I kept having this feeling of he understands something, he remembers something that I also am on a journey towards remembering. And I felt so energized and I just felt yes, like I want to collaborate. Is that the right word? I want to know this person. I already know this person. It just felt natural to say, because that's part of what we were doing was forming these groups. And I was like, I'm in. I'm in. Let's be in a group. Whatever that means. Let's be in a group and figure it out. And it happened so naturally. And then Annika was like, I'm in too. And it just, do you remember that? It happened
Hmm.
within minutes. And within like an hour, we had formed our group. And it felt so natural and it came together so easily. And as I was just saying all that, it reminded me of the conversation we had a couple days ago when I was freaking out. And you said what you said.
Classic Victoria.
I know. All the times you've talked me off the ledge, which I have done for you as well. But, and you very clearly were essentially like, stop it. Stop it and remember who you are. And it's gonna make me cry. And and then I told you like thank you. Thank you for reminding me to remember. And it shifted everything for me. And so it feels like I it feels like that's part of the thing that you are discovering is you have this, what did we call you? Even in the group, we called you a spiritual hype man. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was Annika's term. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because it just you have this incredible ability to um what's the word I want to use? Alignment is the word that just came up. Um, hold the center and help people remember. And so I wouldn't have known how to say that at the time, but that's what I was feeling that made me drawn to you.
Yeah, what you said the other day was, I forgot, and you reminded me to remember.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
there's something about that statement that I don't think I will ever forget because there is something very powerful in that statement. I mean, it's a very powerful statement in general,
Hmm.
but there's something very specific about that for me that feels like it unlocked something.
Hmm.
It was literally like, and I think I said some version of this to you, but it was like, oh yeah, I said, yeah, apparently that's one of my superpowers.
Hmm. Yeah.
And there
Because I
are, uh, go ahead, but then it's segue time.
okay. Well, I was just gonna say because there's something I would say that that's the common thread. Each time we've had a conversation or you've done a an Akashic reading for me, that's the piece that I've always walked away with is coming back into alignment with whatever we want to call it, like the our truth, our source, like that still center feeling of being connected to what we really are, which you can't really be we're not connected to what we really are. We are what we really are. And you have a way of bringing people into alignment with that in a very straightforward, humorous, loving, but no nonsense way. There's no fluff.
Yep. Unfluffed over
Yeah,
here.
unfluffed. There's no like esoteric, not to offend anybody, but there's no
There's
like
no
es
woo-woo hippie shit coming from.
right, right, right. It's connected to our humanness. There's nothing bypassy about it. It's the human having the experience of what we're experiencing. Um, yeah, so I don't know what if you want me to share anything else, but that
No,
was
because we're coming right up on time, like I said we were going to.
yeah.
Um, so now we're to the where the hell did this podcast YouTube channel thing come from?
Mhm.
And the answer is a week ago today. So, okay, apparently this is important. So in August, I was super sick. I've never been sick like that in my entire 43 years on the planet. And it was equally, if not more, an energetic experience as a physical one. And it basically took me 2 entire months to feel like I had actually recovered. From people I've talked to, it sounded like I had every variant of COVID like all at the same time,
Mhm.
basically.
Mhm.
And I had just gotten over that. And then I got sick again with what I would just classify as like normal fall stuff. Had some congestion, had some nasal stuff, wanted to sleep a lot. But that was, again, at least, if not more, an energetic experience as a physical one.
Mhm.
That leads me to last Tuesday. Like last Monday, I was basically functionally useless. Between like feeling sick and all the energetic stuff that was happening, I really couldn't do anything. Tuesday morning, I woke up and I felt great. And I've heard people in podcasts, um, in books, YouTube, like stuff. I've heard more than a handful of people talk about they were able to write a book at some point in their life because in meditation or some other through a dream, some other way, they literally got downloaded. They would call like a zip file into their brain
Mhm.
and they felt it and they had the experience of it and they just had everything they needed.
Yeah.
I received some sort of version of that last Tuesday. There was no intention that I set. Like, for the longest time now, and I've said repeatedly, and I'll say it again now. Every time in this journey, I've thought I've had any idea where any of this was going. I was absolutely and completely incorrect. And part of that for me has been learning to stop trying to control stuff, stop trying to decide stuff,
Mhm.
and just understand that I am held and supported and guided on levels that I cannot even possibly begin to imagine.
Yeah.
And to not limit myself to what human Jacob from this single lifetime knows, because there's way more out there.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, none of this was on the radar. And then, um, like went to the gym. Did I go to the gym? No, I did not. Um, I did like these affirmation decrees that I've been doing in the morning, and I was sat down at my desk here and was getting ready to go to work, and it was just like out of nowhere. I just started like just getting just getting stuff. And you know what I'm talking about if you've ever experienced it because it feels completely different. Again, there was nothing about this then or now that was like me thinking or me deciding or me doing anything. All of this came from somewhere else. The name, like the logo, the descriptions, some other stuff, how we ended up having this podcast, which was clearly supposed to be for you because, among other things, you're leaving the country in a couple of weeks. And the episode that's coming next week, which is going to be about AI. And I have these like two totally different things that don't make any sense, which is perfect. um, because what I'm calling the Origin series is about just people and their stories and their journey and unpacking what the last couple of years slash their lives have been like to get them to wherever they are now, combined with the technology stuff, which I'm super passionate about, um, particularly AI, crypto, blockchains, all this kinds of stuff. And the episode next week is going to be all about me channeling the Akashic records of AI and seeing what it has to say because it feels like it has a lot to say. I've done this for myself a couple of times. It usually takes me a couple of days to recover, so I'm kind of scared about that. Um, but I'll have somebody there with me to help and to interface. And it seems like for the time being, we're just going to kind of alternate back and forth between those two things. I was telling Victoria before this started, but like this whole thing is another exercise for me, and I'm being given exactly what I need to know when I need to know it. And every time Jacob and all my Saturn alignments try to make lists and be like, we got to do this, and we need a thumbnail, and we need chapters, and we need transcripts, and we need closed captioning, and we need a website, and we need blah, blah, blah. It's just like, shut up. None of that matters. When you need to know any of that, if you need to know it, you'll know it. Don't worry about anything. Um, which is so completely different from how I used to operate, where I would gather just mountains and mountains of information. I would know every single little detail. I would have a plan from end to end. I would have a calendar. And now it's like, no, you don't. I know you just don't do any of that. Um, because I just continues to be like, because it's like spirit knows if they give me too much, I'll start making decisions based on my limited human experience and understanding about way things are going to be. And they're like, no, no, no. Like we have a plan. Everything's good. Don't worry about it. Here we are.
Well, and even when you asked me to do this episode, I was like, oh, I don't know, because I'm traveling and I'm scouting for places to live, and I was like, I don't know if my schedule because I need to keep it open for opportunities. And then it was this morning where I was like, yep, we're good. And you even said like, I remember you having resistance to like, wait, no, like it, I have to know. The feeling I got was I need to know what's going to happen. I need
Yeah.
to be able to plan.
It was
And there's
it
the
was
part of
very
like,
clear that you needed to be in this episode. And when you were like, I can't commit to that because basically your response was, I can't commit to that because something might happen and I might decide to do that instead. And I
yeah.
was like, no, no, you can't do that.
It's not an acceptable answer. But then within like 30 minutes, you were
And
like,
then
something.
but then I sat with it and I was just like, okay, what is going on here? Because my guidance is like very clear. And it
Mhm.
was like, just calm down, man. Everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Just don't worry about it. And I told you, and I was like, this part seems completely unnecessary. Why can't she just say yes? And it was like, just trust, man. Okay.
Yeah.
But here we are. Everything's fine.
Everything's fine.
It all
It
worked
worked.
out.
Yes, it did. Um, which is also such an illustration of how different you and I are. Like that little slip right there that illustrates perfectly the
Yeah.
difference, which I think also is one of the reasons why we've continued on this journey together, because there's such a complement of um the different ways that we do things. And it's such a reminder for both of us.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm so
I
happy
I
that
would call it all of the weird things that you do and still do that I don't understand.
um,
Oh, also, I would be remiss if I didn't tell everybody, uh, like just how important you were in those first couple of years when I didn't know anything about anything. And you were like, you and I mean, Annika too to a certain degree, but mostly you, because immediately I felt like I had known you my entire life.
Mhm.
And we gave each other shit and we made fun of each other, but we were also there for each other. But like you were the model that was like, no, all this is fine. Like none of this is weird.
It's so weird, but it's also totally normal.
Yeah, it's so weird, but like there's totally normal about it. And like you have been way more on that side of things for years before I was. So you had like all these experiences, and I'd be like, she's totally normal. Normal.
Normal, relatively speaking. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was as significant as it was for you, it was that significant for me as well, because that was a phase where I was learning how to trust my own gifts and like sort of walking beside you in many ways, helped me learn a lot about myself. So it's been a journey.
Yep. Okay, so we'll end it there. If you've watched this far, thank you for watching. If you have questions or comments, put them in the comments. I will link various social media and stuff in the description, and if Victoria wants me to include anything of hers, I will do so. As she mentioned, she's in a very transitory place at this time, so we'll see what happens with that, but this is almost certainly not the last time you will be seeing her.
Yay. I hope not. I have an interesting origin too, so we'll see.
Oh, that is true. By the way, I might edit this part out, but
Mhm.
uh I tapped into that because it seems like Annika needs to be the next one. So
Mm.
like we do this